So obviously, we know that Superman stories, for me personally, I can't speak for the other two, are usually relatively uninteresting and kind of boring to me. Again, the more interesting stories that he has within his comic runs are either when he's evil, like the Red Sun, or when he's getting murdered, like in Doomsday. The question I pose to you guys, probably we'll go to Ethan first since you are the expertise when it comes to writing. What do you think are the difficulties when it comes to writing a Superman tale in general? And what do you think would be the best Superman tale to write? Like, what kind of arc would you take him on?
So I think both of y'all are storytellers in different veins, though, and you're also very observant about storytelling. Get that out the way first. But to address your first question, Dev, the hardest thing to write is a character, is a compelling or believable flawed character. When I say flawed, I don't mean like, or a character that has a flaw. And I don't mean like for Superman, people think, oh, his flaw is kryptonite. No, his flaw isn't kryptonite. His flaw is that he wants to be human, that he yearns to be something he cannot be. And it bothers him all the time, basically. He's a giant man trying to fit in a Clark Kent suit, and it's not going to happen. So any story that actually deals with his actual internal struggle that he wants to be something he can't be is inherently relatable. But the problem is most writers don't want to do that, and most audiences don't understand that that's what makes him more interesting. So you have a lot of stories that feature him being more bombastic or more trying to face bigger, stronger bad guys in a fist fight, which may look pretty, I guess, on a page or a movie screen, but isn't nearly as immersive or engaging ultimately. So that's the kind of the double-edged sword dealing with a character like an OP character like Superman. Someone like Saitama or One Punch Man works because he's aware of his flaw and he sees it all the time. There's episodes that deal with him like showing him in a paradise where he's dreaming about fighting people that he can actually fight for a while. He can't beat them. And he wakes up, he's like, fuck, I'm still OP as hell. So there are ways to deal with quote unquote ubermensches or Superman characters where they are still dealing with their flaw or have a flaw. The funny thing about that too is you can argue that Batman is an ubermensch of sorts. He's way too smart. He's way too capable to be existing. He's not realistic, really. The idea is the cheat code we use is so if he gets shot or something like that, or he bleeds, or he can't fly, he has to use gadgets for it. But there are so many parallels between the two characters. It's like, well, you're using the same cheat codes. You're just slightly altering a few things, a few details. As far as your second question, Dev, I know I'm rambling. I apologize for that.
No, that's the point of it, right, man?
But the best kinds of stories, I think that, as I mentioned before, the best kinds of stories for Superman characters are the ones where we see him actually dealing with his struggle. I know Man of Steel got a lot of grief, but I think it's undeniable that the beginning part of that movie where it shows him like, well, how would you feel if you felt like you were just alone in the world and didn't know what to do? All of us, blurs, white folks, gorgeous women at one time in our lives felt like we were alone and didn't know what to do with our lives. And that's very relatable. So making an Ubermensch feel relatable in some capacity is the golden rule. If you can do that with any character across the board, your story should have it, period. And I think that's a problem that some stories just don't do. I think that's the fastest way to lose your audience is to make the character feel unrealistic. Rings of power, cough, cough. So that's the thing. If you can make Superman show him struggling in a way that is relatable, you will get the audience 10 times out of 10. But most writers, and I'm not trying to bash DC writers, but I'm just saying that it may be that from the higher ups are saying, we don't want that. We want the bombastic stuff, and they deal with that instead.
All right. Otis?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll take it from a little bit of a different direction than what he said. Give him villains that actually make him question his own righteousness, for one. Don't just put the wrong person out there. Like, maybe you put a person that he is given okay, the best scenario I've ever seen Superman put in where he was really psychologically hit, at least in my opinion, was an Injustice one. The Joker hit him with the souped up fear gas and made him that Lois was find ways to really put him through some trauma psychologically. He's not a human, but he's still a person that has emotions and feelings. That's what he cares about. Like put him in some real scenarios where, like, as strong as he is, he can't things to fix the situation. I mean, like put him in some real things instead of just another really, really, really strong guy. Now you got to go plus ultra again, Superman. Yay!
Right.
For me, I guess I'm gonna be in a similar vein of my two acquaintances here. I think the problem with him is the same kind of problem I have with Captain America, where the writers, I guess more so because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was created by two Jewish men during like World War II, right? Like he was supposed to be the like leading North Star for the Jewish people. Like he's supposed to be the impenetrable shield and like the hero. And I think in him doing that, I think over time they made that character too perfect to where he just makes all the right decisions. He always has the great moral and ethical decisions. And I think he really shines in scenarios where he does not have that. With Injustice, The Red Son, for me, one of my favorite ones being Smallville, where he's literally just a teenager and living a teenager thing. For me, the perfect story with Superman would be something similar to Smallville, but one, a little bit better written, and two, even in Smallville, like he makes some things that teenagers would do, but he still was ethically always right and morally always right. Like there are characters that will come into the show, whether it be like the Flash or other people like that, and they'll have their either revenge story or their selfish thing that they want to do, and he's always just the one like, no, you can't do that. It's not right. You have to do the right thing. I'd like to see Superman, I guess, be a human being without the moral guidance of Martha and I can't remember his dad's name.
Johnny Boy.
Yeah. Johnny Kent, yeah. Having him just do him and just be a regular, like not be to the same degree of like Injustice level where he's just evil, but just be a regular person without the super moral compass where you make the same mistakes that regular people make, but your mistakes are higher, have greater consequences because of your power and the things that you do to affect your world. Sure. That'd be me and my personal favorite Superman story. Same thing with Captain America. Again, maybe not to the same extent because he's not as strong, but again, just don't always make the right ethical choices and the right moral choices because it makes you seem, for me, it comes across very unrelatable.
Right.
Because no human being is always even the best person is going to make ethical and moral mistakes that they normally wouldn't see as the best thing to do. Just because you're a human being, you make those mistakes.
I completely agree. I agree with both of y'all, actually. Mm-hmm. But I think it would be fun, as Otis said, for the show to see him go up against characters. Because that's something that they do in Batman a lot, is they have the characters do challenge him in different ways, as far as like psychologically or mentally, physically. They put him through the ringer in things that he thinks he's good at, and he gets tested in those areas. And I guess Dev said, or Charlie said, make kind of in a way show the journey that Superman goes on to this. For all of us, we had to learn the difference between right and wrong. We weren't born with an all-powerful compass that told us what was absolute. We had to learn those things. We had to make mistakes. And Smallville does touch on those. It actually does show Clark making mistakes from time to time. But like you said, it maybe there's more nuanced writing. But it would be one of the things I like about anime is that it does show characters, even the best of characters, making mistakes. I mean, Goku is praised kind of like being the parallel to Superman. That dude is borderline the villain of that series. We all know that. The fans know that. But also, I'm a big fan of My Hero Academia, and that it kind of shows the Superman figure in his final days. Spoiler alert! And it shows the newer character, his heir, having to deal with things. It shows him having to grow up. Like, it shows his learning curve, essentially. If they had shown Superman having to deal with a learning curve properly, that could have been really interesting. Or Captain America too. So I agree with what you're saying.
All right. I think that plays into like why Batman's probably, I mean, maybe you can make the argument, but I think he's like the most popular DC character. And that's more so because he's a human being, and he has infinite amounts of stories where he's either an asshole, he's over controlling, he's narcissistic, has a borderline mental health issue where he's just determined to save lives, even at the cost of other lives. And him showing he has all these flaws and mistakes as a person, and all these different stories kind of take one of those flaws and put them into the forefront. And I think that's why Batman's so popular, because he's so much more relatable to people. He has these problems.
That is Rose Gallery.
Well, that and Rose Gallery as well.
Because the Rose Gallery, but they do what you said, Otis. They challenge him in those ways. Yeah. But let me ask you this real quick, though, Dev and Otis. Do you see Batman as moral or amoral?
Amoral.
I'd say the same.
That's what I say too. He's more or less like it's objective based. It's the end justifies the means, which he will do things that you definitely shouldn't do. He has no problem breaking the law. He's done
several illegal things.
Yeah, that's right. His MO is breaking the law over and over and over again. But it's ultimately to get the greatest good, but he will damn sure he has no qualms about, literally shattering a guy's body, putting them into triage. They'll survive, but they'll be so fucked up. What's the point?
Live their rest of life in their body, get all their food.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's part of like looking into like the dichotomy between him and Superman 2 when it comes to their moral compasses. They both lead to them kind of having, at least wanting the same result. But with Superman having the moral compass of his parents teaching him right from wrong, Batman has that trauma of like murder in his mind 24/7, which I guess you see it a lot in like the more recent Harley Quinn episode where he's just reliving it over and over again. Great. Or he's kind of doing things out of his like triggering of his PTSD versus it being the right thing to do a lot of the times. And funny enough, he is a mirror to his rogues gallery as well. Like with Superman's rogues gallery, they're all just like conquerors and all they're Hitlers, they're conquerors, they're Nazis and things of that nature. They're like, you have the all good, like the all powerful good guy and the all powerful evil guys. With Batman's rogues galleries, they're usually somewhere in between. Sometimes they'll like be a little more evil and depending on the story, but majority of the time in between, they're people that have gone through some kind of traumatic experience and sometimes react to how most people would. It's, I got this power where I'm a clay monster. I'm going to be selfish and do something to make me feel better. Or I am a woman that controls people's minds. So I'm going to have my own agenda. I'm going to use these powers to achieve my agenda, no matter what that is.
Right.
Most people, they get power that they're going to use them selfishly. And then you just have Batman with the selfish motivations of his trauma there to counteract that.
Right. I mean, that old Arabic saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely. But what you said, the easiest way to break it down is that essentially all of Batman's rogues have some kind of a mental struggle, whether it be an illness or just a phobia or condition or whatever it is. And Batman is a person who can relate to all of them because he has several mental issues and conditions, and he's aware of it too. So oftentimes you will see Batman one or two steps ahead of you, the people he's fighting, because he knows what they're dealing with, because he himself can relate to it or understands it. Sometimes he actually will. One of the episodes we talked about before, one of our favorite episodes from Just Like Unlimited, Epilogue, he sits down. It shows him sitting down with, was it Ace? No, it wasn't Ace.
It was Ace.
Girls. It was Ace.
She was one of the Aces, yeah.
One of the Aces, and they changed the roster. But he sits down with her and talks to her in a way that no one else could do. And even Waller calls him out, like, yeah, he's able to do that because he's able to sympathize and empathize in a way that other people can't because he has so many conditions to deal with. And you mentioned Superman is basically, because he is an Ubermensch, the world he has to deal with is other dictators, other powerful, power-hungry beasts, because that's what he is, essentially himself. However, he's at the opposite end of that spectrum. He believes power should be used to help those that are lesser than as opposed to oppress them. So both of them they're both having to deal with the opposite side of the coin from themselves in some capacity. If that makes sense.
Right. It's okay to mix up coins. I mean, you can do other things. It doesn't always have to be the grandiose world conqueror coming to take over the planet again for you to save him again.
I agree. One of my favorite, do y'all remember the introductory episode in the Superman show, the Bruce Timm show, introduced the character Livewire?
Yes.
There's a part where she's like essentially on the radio talking to Lois Lane about how Superman is like the worst. And she's talking about how he's never there. He never does the job, never helps anybody out. And it shows Superman trying to hold up a crane that breaks, and the crane is going to drop down and kill like a baby a baby and a woman down below. The struggle is actually not whether or not Superman will survive. It's whether he can get the job done without having him get killed. So sometimes it's fun to watch him essentially as a street level hero, figuring out how can I help the most people in the least amount of time with the least amount of casualties in a way that only Superman can. Seen him struggle with that, even in that weird ass, badass movie, Superman Returns. I'm sorry for bringing it up, but there's one really cool scene where that plane, or that it's like the plane / rocket shuttle is going off, and you see Superman trying to figure out how to keep that plane from crashing and everyone dying. The struggle isn't, you never worry about him being in danger, but you do worry about everyone else around him that he's trying to save. Can he save them, essentially? So
it's just like just more scenes like how they did in Spider-Man 2, where Spider-Man had to save the train of people. Like, I mean, I guess in that scene you were also worried about his safety too, because I mean he passed out from it. But yeah, just not as creating that sense of, oh, these people might not survive. Like, I mean, giving some gravity to the situation instead of just another fight.
Stakes. Right. Yeah, actual stakes. Because Superman's not the same as One Punch Man. One Punch Man is never really in danger, but the people around him are. The episode of One Punch Man with the that giant sea creature, essentially. We're never worried about Saitama. It's probably like everyone's favorite episode, basically. But the idea is like the danger is still there for everyone around, and those are the stakes. So having more of that be palpable and real, you know.
I think even going back to the Bruce Timm verse, my favorite version of Batman isn't even in that like decade or that time period. If you go and watch Batman Beyond, there is an episode in which they're trying to bring Batman into the Justice League, and you get to meet Superman at that point. And Terry McGinnis is for his mind, he knows Superman is all power, like what he has been for majority of that universe's run, the all powerful, all strong moral compass. But you get to a point to where you see Superman starting to act out of character a little bit, where he's being a little more jaded and a little bit like, and they get into that shot. I can't remember if he was mind controlled or not, or if that was just him naturally over time. Yeah. Like he, at least before you find out he was being mind controlled, they pretty much made it seem as though he had become jaded after years and years of being the all powerful moral compass. He's like, I've had enough of that. I want to do things for myself. I want to be selfish for once. I've earned that. I deserve that. And you start to see just again what it seems like will be the I'm kind of mad that Starro was the one behind that, but it felt like a natural progression for somebody that lived that long with that amount of power and restricted. It's like if I were to have this cheesecake in front of me, like a pumpkin cheesecake or something, and for 30 years, I know that this cheesecake would taste, it's like the best thing I will ever eat in my life. But for other people to get their own cheesecake for 30 years, I had to ignore this cheesecake and never touch this thing. By the time I'm like 60 and I'm becoming jaded and I've been around for so long, at some point I want to be selfish and I want to have my own piece of that cheesecake. Everybody else had theirs. I want my own piece of this cheesecake. Yeah. And in that, at least for that episode, I thought that was like the best that character had been written in that verse up until that point. Granted, I was kind of sad finding out it was mind control, which usually is with him, is somebody acting out of character, which is probably why I liked Invincible so much, because when they saw Omni-Man acting out of character, I was like, oh, you got to be mind controlled or something. He's like, no, this is just me.
I get acting out of character all yet you have known me.
Right.
Yeah, no, I feel you. That's a good reference. I know we're talking forever, but this is a good conversation. I don't care.
I was going to say that. Like, I mean, the best portrayals of Superman are actually not Superman. They're Homelander and Omni-Man. We know this.
Oof, Homelander. You brought up Homelander. Or even Saitama. I feel like Saitama is a good example too of him. Or even Captain America, more so in the films, in the MCU, as far as someone that's trying to be righteous in a world that's not righteous. Keep in mind, Captain America does abandon the shield. He literally drops his shield and says, fuck y'all, grows in a beard and walks away. Because he's like, I'm trying to be a righteous... Fair.
Beard
game. That beard game was crisp. But the thing is, like, I'm trying to be a righteous person in a world that doesn't want that. What am I supposed to do? I'm walking away. I feel like you're saying, Dev, sometimes it does seem unrealistic for it to be there to be that much of a pinnacle of a person like Superman to exist. But the idea with Superman is that he's meant to be. He's always what the Siegel and Schuster, the guys who created Superman, wanted him to be, was a beacon of hope. That last vestige, as far as like when you think you can't do something, you can, almost like a Christ symbol, even though they're Jewish. I think the only way that you can get away with doing something like that is for Superman to actually have breaking points and have low days. But you see that he does have a family. He's a support network. When he gets down, when he gets low on himself, whatnot, he's not by himself. He has Lois, or he has his son now. He has his parents. So those things do happen, and he's able to come back. Batman, in a way, traditionally before, tried to isolate himself so he wouldn't. When he pretty much stayed in the low, stayed in the darkness. So he was able. That's how he worked. If anything made him happy or light, it would kind of conflict with that. That's the whole point of that movie, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. He's like, I can't do my job if I have happiness there too. So it's different bases and different styles for characters.